Hey folks, in this video, we're going to go over how to resolve failed eligibility checks using the Stedi Agent. First, we'll talk about what the Stedi Agent actually is, how it works, and how to access it. Next, we'll look at an example of the Stedi Agent actually resolving a failed eligibility check in real time. Then, we'll wrap this up by taking a quick look at two related features, AI chats and Payer Finder. Let's get started. The Stedi Agent is a Stedi-controlled AI assistant that lives within the Stedi portal. Its current purpose is to resolve failed eligibility checks. The reality is that most failed eligibility checks are actually recoverable. Common causes of these recoverable failures might be mismatched patient details between what you submitted in the request and what the payer has on file. So maybe you submitted a subscriber first name that's like one letter off, for example. Or maybe you submitted totally valid subscriber data, but you just happen to submit the request to the wrong payer ID. Maybe your patient is covered by one of the 33 different Blue Cross Blue Shield entities, and you just happen to submit this patient to the wrong one. Or maybe the payer is just having a momentary outage. Whatever the case may be, each of these different recoverable failure scenarios results in a specific error code being returned by the payer. And in most cases, those error codes lead to clear, automatable recovery steps. The Stedi Agent performs those steps for you so that you can spend less time debugging failed eligibility checks manually. Why go back to the patient and ask them to confirm their details or make a whole phone call to a payer when you simply don't have to? For context, as of today, almost a third of Stedi customers are using Stedi Agent every week, and approximately a third of all the checks they retry with the agent result in a success. Another way to think about that is, for every 10 recoverable eligibility failures, you can use the Stedi Agent to avoid 3 payer phone calls. So how do we access the Stedi Agent? Well, it's accessible via the Stedi UI. You can find it by hovering over a failed eligibility check. If that check failed with a recoverable failure code, then you'll see this Resolve with Stedi Agent button here on the right. Clicking that button will open a debug view, we'll do that in a moment, where you can watch it work step by step in real time. Let's go ahead and actually look at this. Let's look at an example end to end of the Stedi Agent resolving a failed eligibility check. I'll start by sending out this specific mock eligibility check. Okay, so we can see that the check resulted in a failure. The error code returned by the payer for this specific failure is a AAA 73 code. That basically means that the subscriber name that we submitted in the request doesn't exactly match what's on file in the payer's system for this member. This may not seem like a recoverable error on first glance. How could I possibly resolve an issue where the payer is telling me I have entirely invalid subscriber data, like an incorrectly spelled first or last name, without going back to the patient and having them reconfirm their info? Well, the underlying reality is that not all payers actually require a first and or last name to be submitted in an eligibility check, as long as you can send them some other subscriber data that is accurate, like maybe a member ID. So really, if we can just figure out the precise offending subscriber field that we're sending in this request and drop that field from the request entirely, we very well might be able to get this check to succeed. With all of this in mind, let's try resolving this failure with the Stedi Agent and see how it handles this scenario. So I'll go ahead and hit my Resolve with Stedi Agent button at the top right here now. And we can see we've now been taken to that debug view I was describing a little bit earlier. On the right side of the screen in this debug view, I can see a live feed where the agent will tell me exactly what it's doing and why, one step at a time. On the left, I can see a table showing each eligibility check the agent has run and what exact changes it made in each request. So, for example, here in row 2, we can see that the agent tried to drop the member ID field, just in case maybe the payer is incorrectly returning a AAA 73. Maybe it's just actually trying to say the member ID was wrong, so we tried dropping that. We can see that that actually resulted in a AAA 72 error, which tells us there's an issue with the member ID we submitted. So naturally, it continued with a handful of other logical steps here. At the end of the process, we saw that confetti a moment ago, it was able to get a check to run successfully by dropping actually all subscriber fields other than the member ID. So it looks like the member ID submitted in the original request was actually accurate. And it just so happens that this particular payer doesn't require any of the other subscriber data fields in the request in order to return a successful response. We can now go ahead and actually view the check. And since it was successful, we can see all the benefit details returned by the payer for this member. So this was admittedly a very straightforward example. The agent basically just tried a series of different subscriber field permutations to see what this particular payer might be willing to accept. But the agent does have far more logic built into its underlying prompts for more complicated scenarios and solution paths, all depending on the specific AAA error code returned by the payer. Speaking of prompts, it's worth noting that all of the prompts used by the Stedi agent to resolve checks like this are actually built right into Stedi's MCP server. We'll go over the MCP server in more depth in a future video, but for now, the key thing to understand is that you want to access all of the Stedi agent's capabilities using your own AI agents. You can do so by installing and configuring the Stedi MCP server. Now finally, speaking of all of the agent's capabilities, let's wrap up by taking a quick look at two other features related to the Stedi agent. Those are AI chats and Payer Finder. If I click on this chat bubble at the top right of my UI, you can see that I get brought to an AI chats page. Here I can see all of my past uses of the Stedi agent. So for example, if I click on this chat at the top of the list, we can see the full step-by-step process the agent used to debug the check we were just looking at a moment ago. So this is a great way to see a list of all your historical past invocations of the Stedi agent. Aside from a history of Stedi agent invocations, you can also use this page to access what we call the Payer Finder. So if I click New Chat up here and hit Payer Finder, a page opens where I can converse with the agent directly in plain English about payer-related questions. For example, let's say I need to run an eligibility check for a member who has Blue Cross Blue Shield Texas as their payer, but I don't know the correct payer ID for Blue Cross Blue Shield Texas. I need to confirm that. In this case, I can ask the agent a question, such as, what payer ID should I use to send an eligibility check to Blue Cross Blue Shield Texas? The agent will then use its tools and backend prompts to provide me with a plain English recommendation. And of course, just like with Stedi agent invocations, we can see a historical record of all the Payer Finder conversations we've had here in the list view of our AI chats. Resolving failed eligibility checks and helping with these sorts of payer-related questions are just the first two use cases we've unveiled for the Stedi agent. We're very, very excited to continue expanding the agent to more parts of the platform. But for now, what we went over today is an overview of the Stedi agent, what it is, how it works, and how to access it. We also looked at an example of how it can resolve failed eligibility checks for you in real time. Then we learned about the AI chats page where we can converse directly with the agent using Payer Finder. Thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.